That will be the primary vote tomorrow, the Democratic primary for New York State's 22nd U.S. Congressional District. My intention was to have her opponent, Senator John Mannion, on the show tonight to give his perspective and to make things fair. And in doing so, we offered him an invitation to be on the show. He accepted that invitation on June 12th. On June 17th, there was a post made on the social media publishing website called Medium that was attributed to concerned Mannion staffers. In that post, they allege harassment and bullying and intimidation by this senator. While that was still posted on Medium, our intention was still to have Senator Mannion on the show just to talk about his approach to campaigning through the media. If you listen to the show when I had Sarah Lee Hood on, we talked about her ad that demonstrated her support for abortion rights, and we talked about the kind of what went into the thought process to create that advertisement and how people respond to that ad. We like to have a media focus on these Monday shows. With Senator Mannion, what I intended to talk to him about was how he uses more of a traditional paper-based mailer kind of media. That was the plan. What happened was the Medium post came out on Monday, June 12th. The next day, on Tuesday, June 7th, let me back this up. Okay, this is the most complicated show I've ever done. So here's what happened. So this was last week. So let's back this up. Last Monday, last Monday, I'm thinking, hey, next week, Senator Mannion's going to be on the show. I've been collecting some of these mailers I keep getting in the mail from him. I'm going to approach it with a media topic, media focus, which is what I like to do. I was going to ask him about how print media works for him and has that been effective and how's that worked for him and kind of what goes into making a good, successful advertisement in print, in a mailer that you mail to people that you want to vote for you. That was the plan. Last Monday, that would be Monday, June 17th, there was a post made on Medium by concerned Mannion staffers that alleged abuse, harassment, homophobia, transphobia, and also having a really retaliating against staffers who made complaints about sexual harassment. So until that post was picked up by other media, more national media, I had not intended to talk about this, but the next day, that would be Tuesday, June 18th, it appeared on the New York Post website, and then the next day it was in the New York Post print edition. There was an article that was entitled "State Senator A Bully Ex-Staff Speak." That was by Vaughn Golden, and in that article, I'm going to quote from them so that I'm not really characterizing this myself. This is what the article says that was published in the New York Post on June 19th. It says that Senator Mannion, I quote, fostered a hostile work environment where he routinely berated employees and retaliated against those who spoke up, former staffers allege. So that happened. Then the next day, that would be Wednesday, that would be Thursday, June 20th, the senator canceled his appearance on the show through a staffer who sent me a text. I did text back, and I did say that I thought this would be a really good opportunity maybe for him to defend himself, or if he wanted to send somebody else, a surrogate, to defend him. So that offer is still kind of open here, and if someone's interested in doing that, would like to talk about that, our studio line is 570-815-6988. So before I go to our first guest here, who is John Hysell from the Kirkland Democrats, I just wanted to say a little bit about what was in the Medium post. I'm going to quote exactly from concerned Mannion staffers, and I do want you to know, listeners, that I did I interviewed one of the people who wrote that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. The conversation was background only, it was off the record, but the person who I spoke to did share with me some things that I was able to put into my 2024 NY22 page on the Utica Phoenix website, and I also tweeted out, so I'll talk about that too. But first, just a little bit about, this is a direct quote from the Medium post that was entitled "To Central New Yorkers," and it was attributed to concerned Mannion staff. One of the things that they said is that this is basically, we are ready to share our experiences of a hostile work environment, including mistreatment, harassment, and retaliations. Our allegations are serious, often sexist, and homophobic in nature, and we hope that they will be taken seriously. So I think that's really a good place for us to kind of begin our conversation here. My question to listeners and to the guests we have today is this something that voters will take seriously tomorrow when they go to vote in the primary election? Is it something that people have been thinking about, have been talking about? Has it played part of their decision-making process if they voted already, because early voting began 2 weeks ago? Is this important? Does it matter? Will it affect the outcome of tomorrow's primary vote? John Hysell, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you are with the Kirkland Democrats.
I am not, for clarity.
I'm sorry. I thought you were the Kirkland Democrats.
I'm a private citizen, not a member of Kirkland Democrats.
Okay, but you are a Democratic voter.
I absolutely am a Democratic voter.
Okay, so these allegations, did they impact your vote?
I think it's a...
You see, you get closer to the mic.
Sure. It's an interesting question.
Maybe a little bit closer. Maybe you want to pull
sure.
that.
I'm an early voter.
Okay.
And I voted.
Yes.
And I've been a strong advocate both last campaign for Sarah Kleehood as well as this one. So I'm not really objective necessarily, though I certainly can answer your question. If I were to consider the allegations, I would have to, number one, recognize that to this point they're anonymous,
Right.
which gives me pause. I remember clearly in 2004 election, a candidate that I felt very strongly about, John Kerry, was swift voted, and it turned out that those allegations were groundless and it had an impact. On the other hand, when I read the Medium letter from what I understood to be John Mannion staffers, I was deeply troubled by it. And it would influence my primary vote had I not already had a commitment to Sarah Kleehood.
So, do you think that people that are voting now, like in your conversations with people, other Democrats about this, are people aware of this? What do people think about this? Do people know this is actually happening too?
I travel in a circle of people who generally are well-informed, read a lot about politics, listen to politics. A number of them are John Mannion supporters, and they're very much aware of this.
What do they say?
I think the initial feedback was wait and see, and I need to go take a look and dig a bit deeper. I gave him the benefit of doubt at the front end, just as I suggested to you, hoping that there would be some measure of public confirmation. And feedback I got from a Mannion supporter was, this is an internal thing, it's not an external smear, and his choice was directly impacted.
The voter that you spoke to.
Right. He didn't come out and say, I'm not going to vote for John Mannion, but it struck me that the seriousness of the allegations had an impact on his view of him as a candidate. And rather than speculating on how he's going to vote, he's a serious person, and he's taking this seriously.
I mean, one would hope that in a primary vote, especially with a Democratic primary, that people would be concerned about issues such as this, like workers' rights and the rights of women in the workforce and the rights of and some people have said to me too that it is like an internal thing. But on the other hand, if we're picking somebody that we want to run for higher office, we're picking our candidate. Does that mean that in a primary vote or with a politician or with an elected official, is the bar a little bit lower in terms of like us having more right to know what goes on in that person's workplace, how they are to their employees, especially how they treat, minorities or other marginalized communities? do we have a right to know this kind of stuff?
I'm certain we have a right to know it. Is the bar lower? I'm not sure I follow
Well,
that.
I guess I mean, like, if this were, like, say, a private workforce, if this were somebody who, a boss who's just a bad boss, but who wasn't running for Congress, you know, there may be more of an argument that really it is an internal thing. But with something like this, where this person is asking us to support him, you know, to run for Congress, does that mean that, you know, we have a right to know more about, like, really, how are they? How do they treat people, and what is it like to work for them? And
I understand, and that's a fair question. And my answer would be yes. If they're going to represent us, we want to know not only where they stand on policy, but we'd like to know their character.
what they're really like.
Absolutely.
So before we go further, I do want to read the statement that from the John Mannion campaign, and also one thing I do want to say to you, and I did say this on June 3rd. I'll probably repeat this a few times too. Is I have covered this with a non-biased angle, but I am a supporter of Sarah Hood. I have been since 2022. I'm actually, I would say, an enthusiastic supporter of hers. So if you're listening to this now, and if you've read stuff I've written about this, you know, I'm trying very hard to be fair and impartial, but you do need to know that that's where I'm coming from. I am a supporter of hers too, and I do plan to vote for her tomorrow in the primary. I'm not sure, like, if things were up in the air, I think that this could have swayed my vote too. But let me just say, let me just read the statement. This was from John Mannion's campaign, and this is a statement he released to CNY Central. This is his statement. Let me be clear. As a teacher, a union president, and a New York State senator, I've been in the public eye for a long time, and never in my life or career have I been associated with anything like this. No complaints have ever been filed with HR, with me, with my chief of staff, with the secretary of the Senate, with the Attorney General, or with any of the multiple avenues and protections provided by the New York State Senate to aggrieved employees. Now, I want to interrupt for a minute and say that there is a Senate investigation into this, and I did speak to the concerned Manning staff, the writer of this, about this, and I'll talk about that later in the second segment. He goes on to say, this is not in my character, and it is not how I conduct my business. The timing of this, days from an election, tells you everything you need to know. This is a false political attack. It is a type of dirty politics that I reject. I believe Central New Yorkers and people in the Mohawk Valley will reject it too. I'm going to keep a positive campaign, and I'm completely focused on defeating Brandon Williams and taking back the House of Representatives. So he actually says that, you know, this is not his character, but in an interview with Luke Riddle from WKTV last Wednesday at the Juneteenth event that For the Good hosted, he was asked, like, did you do this? And he did not answer that question. He kind of walked away. So my question is, like, if someone says, this isn't who I am, this is not my character, I don't do this kind of thing, and as of now, you know, really nothing has been proven. There's a Senate investigation into this. It's being covered piecemeal by media. Some have covered it, some have not. How do you decide, like, what is someone's character? It was something I've thought about, like, over the past week. Like, how do I know of this? Like, what can I talk about? Well, how do you know what's real? How do you know what to consider? How do you know what to think about and kind of accept and let be part of your decision making?
I think you have to work as hard as you can to have conversations, to be informed, to read. I think many people are incredibly busy these days, don't have the luxury necessarily of doing that. A lot of the information that is distributed is biased one way or another by the candidate, so it's becoming more and more difficult. I think further, I have to be blunt. The former President Trump's behavior, and he's outspoken in letting me know what his character is in public. My mother recently passed away at 104. She was a lifetime Republican. She could not bring herself to vote for Donald Trump because of her sense as a devout Christian that he lacked the character to be president. he makes it obvious, and yet a large part of the populace ignores that, minimizes it, and so I think we're in a different era.
Even normalizes it.
No, indeed. Not only accepts it, but gives him a pass on his behavior.
So if he's lowered the bar too, does that mean that this kind of thing doesn't matter?
No, I don't. I think it matters a lot. To me, one of the criteria that I hold to be most important for someone that I vote for is my sense of how they're going to behave when they're elected. Not what they send me in the mail or put on Twitter or what have you, but can I get a sense, a gut feeling of who they are, what they represent, because I want them to represent me. Back to your comment relative to support for Sarah Clee Hood, I've had a number of personal conversations with her. I pressed her on questions. I find her character to be impeccable.
Have you ever met him?
I met him once.
I'm going to ask you about that. We have to go to a break now, but when we come back, we'll talk to another supporter of hers who's going to be calling in. We'll also be joined by Cassandra Harris Lockwook, who just asked you the question there. Then I'm going to ask you too, like, what was your impression of him, and did you get some sense of what his character was before you knew about this stuff, before you read this stuff, and before this stuff was in the media? You're in the hot seat on a meeting Monday on 95.5 FM The Heat. We'll be right back after this break.
What I'm looking.
Hi everybody. Welcome back to the hot seat. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. This is a Media Monday in the hot seat, and originally our guest was scheduled to be Senator John Mannion, who was running in the Democratic primary for New York State's 22nd U.S. Congressional District. His opponent is Sarah Clee Hood. She was on the show on June 3rd, so we wanted to have him on for equal time and to hear his side of things. But between the time that we booked him to be on the show and between now, there's been a post on Medium from that was attributed to concerned Mannion staffers. In that post, they allege harassment, mistreatment, a lot of other things that would definitely not appeal to Democratic voters. This Medium post was picked up and it was covered nationally by the New York Post. The New York Post, in their article, they characterized the allegations as fostering a hostile work environment where he routinely berated employees and retaliated against those who spoke up. So, on the phone right now is Kathy Wojciechowski, and Kathy is from the Kirkland Democrats, correct?
No, I'm not from Kirkland
Oh my gosh,
Democrats,
I might
but I
strike
am
you
on
out
the
here.
Oneida County Democratic
All right,
Committee.
well that's good enough. So
John
Oneida
is
County
from-
Democratic Committee. So now, in the last cycle, 2 years ago, you guys endorsed Francis Cano, right?
Well, the Oneida Democratic Committee did. They endorsed
Right.
Francis Cano.
I know that a lot of individuals would have preferred that they did not, but so this time around, did the committee endorse Sarah Clee Hood?
At this time around, there was no endorsement made at all, leaving it up to all the Democrats to make their own choice as to who they were going to support. Leaving it up to the voters, in other words.
So if it's left up to the voters, and before I ask this question, I do want to say that you are someone who you called in on the June 3rd show. You are a supporter of Sarah Clee Hood, so we want to be right up front about that, as am I too, and I want to be up front about that as well. But you're also a voter who is a female. What do you think when you read stuff like this, when you see coverage like this in the news or WKTV or other CNY Central local media? What do you think when you heard these allegations? What did you think?
Well, first of all, yes, it's very serious and alarming. Any type of allegation regarding harassment, intimidation, bullying, especially when it is with a young female staffer, is, like I said, very alarming, very serious and concerning. And the other thing, it's not just for me the allegations that are concerning. I'm also concerned about Mr. Mannion's reaction to the allegations.
How so?
As you said, when you really listen to his responses, nowhere does he deny that these things are true. he doesn't come right out and say they're not true. He kind of talks around it. So
I believe he called it a smear
that has a
campaign.
concern for me.
Right. I mean, what I've seen in the media is like his reaction to it is just to say that it's a smear campaign by the Sarah-Lee Hood campaign. So now you're someone who goes out and knocks on doors.
Well, he doesn't really say it's the.
Yes, I
He said
do.
it was a smear campaign.
Yeah, but didn't attribute it to her.
And it came from the New York Post.
Yeah.
I'm
which is
sorry, I
These are
didn't hear
cons-
quite what
these
you
are-
said. Whatever it is, it's
So-
kind of breaking up a little
Well,
bit.
let me ask you though, like when you do go out and knock on doors and talk to people, other Democrats who either will vote in the primary tomorrow or maybe who have, already done so in early voting, what do people, what sense do you get from what do people say? Do voters know about this? What do they think about this? Are they concerned? Are they persuaded? Will it impact their vote?
I think it should impact votes. I'm not sure, like I said, the door knocking that we've done is pretty much over with now. The election is tomorrow, and a lot of these allegations obviously didn't come out until last week. But I know if I wasn't already a Sarah Lee Hood supporter, that I seriously would consider these allegations before casting my vote, trying to do a little more research into the truthfulness of these things. And this is another thing that, like I said, Mr. Mannion's response that concerns me, because he himself hasn't called for an investigation into this. I would think that if he thought these allegations were unfounded, that he'd be the first one saying, let's investigate this, let's clear my name. He has not done that. I have not heard that he's called for the investigation.
So let me just ask you one more question before you go. Do you get a sense that people that outside of like the people are really invested in the campaign, people who like really care about the NY222 thing, outside of that, do you think people are aware of this?
No, a lot of people are now. But I would say for the most part, no, because a lot of people don't listen to the news on TV kind of thing. Not a lot of people read newspapers anymore. It is out there in social media, though. So probably more people are aware of it than I realize.
Can I jump in? I want to ask what you think. How many people have already voted in early voting, and how many? I mean, what if someone is so terribly
Good question.
upset by this? They would like to strike their vote or change their vote, or I mean, what's the process here? And what if? I mean, the what ifs are many, and that there's an investigation. Is it underway or going to be underway?
Kathy, before we let go, let me just ask you: do you know anyone who did vote already? Who has
I do know
remorse?
quite a few people who have early voted,
Do you know
but
what?
I also know more people who have not voted.
Okay.
Do you know anyone who voted already who like expressed remorse that maybe they voted on the Saturday and it came out on the Monday? Is there anybody like that?
No, honestly, no. I'm not aware of how people cast their ballots.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you for your call. You are a supporter of Sarah Lee Hood, and thank you for calling in a few weeks ago.
Well, I didn't
on
want
June
to
3rd.
totally interrupt her. There's more she wanted to say. It's just I was thinking about that.
No, Kathy, thank you for the call, Kathy Wojciechowski. Thank you. Do you have any more you want to say?
Thank you for taking my call and listening to my opinion. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for calling
Kathy.
in. Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cassandra.
Yes.
You're female too.
Yes, I am.
What do you think about this?
Well, it's disturbing. It's absolutely disturbing and inappropriate. And I am pretty much convinced that these people are telling the truth. There's corroboration. It's not one person screaming in the wind. There are several, and they've had the courage to come forward. And coming forward in a situation like this is not easy. When someone declares that they're the king and their wife is the queen, they've established a very inappropriate power dynamic there, and so you
Crazy
complain.
out of balance.
Yeah.
power
So you
dynamic.
complain, and you probably don't have a job tomorrow. you know, and jobs are not, you know, are not that
And more
easy
to
to
the
come
point,
by.
you know,
Right.
you complain you may not have the job in that field. Down the road. One of the things that the person I talked to, and I'll talk about that in a moment. One of the things that they said was that they fear retaliation.
That's what I'm talking about.
Both
Yep.
from the senator, but also from the Democratic Party establishment.
Well,
So there's that too.
being a woman, and I haven't heard anything about race in here, but being a non-binary person being mocked in a setting like that, in a professional setting, cannot be a comfortable thing. And you know, it makes me, you know, one of the things that came up when during Juneteenth was looking around and seeing that there were no people of color in any of the camps of any of the candidates. You know, and when you look at the staff of many of our elected officials, you don't see any black people. You know, but that's been normalized. And so, you know, so there are all kinds of, you know, when you really start looking at this thing, who's he representing?
So he was at Juneteenth last
Yes,
Wednesday.
yes.
Both of them were.
Yes.
So I assume you talked to them both?
Yes.
So what was the sense you got from talking to both of them? What was your sense of the character?
Well,
I mean, of course, you know, they're on their best behavior.
absolutely.
They're all
Well, you know,
politicking and stuff.
I see John Mannion as, you know, kind of little standoffish, little, you know, uptight, straight white guy, you know, and you know, saying the things that he should be saying to the people that, you know, he wants to vote for him. And Sarah was a lot more relaxed and a lot more, you know, interactive with the crowd. And I was there when Luke Riddell, is it Radel?
Radel, yes.
When he was I didn't know what was going on, and I heard him twice make that stock statement about, well, this is obviously, you know, a setup, a smear campaign, and then he repeated it again, and then I had turned away, and to come back to hear him like on his heel, he's snapping on his heel and snapping at Luke,
this
saying,
is Mannion, right?
yeah,
Yes.
and saying, I'm not going to answer. I refuse to answer that question. So I don't know what Luke had asked him, but he had asked him a couple of times.
Right.
You know, is this? You know, what do you have to say about this?
Right. I mean, we know what we saw on the news. Luke asked him,
I was right
basically,
there.
did you do this?
Yep.
And he didn't answer that.
Right.
He said this is a smear campaign.
Right.
This is
The
possible.
caller made the same point.
Right.
And I think that we, as you had referenced earlier, Ron, we're in an era when denial is the standard.
Right.
When Brendan Williams was
But he didn't even deny it. Which kind of,
denial by non-answer.
yeah.
And
yeah.
Brendan Williams, you don't have to do a lot to find a video on YouTube of him screaming at his former campaign manager
Right,
how
right.
he would destroy his relationships.
Yep.
And the next day he published, I'm a former nuclear Navy officer and have always treated my
Staff.
subordinates with the greatest respect. And
We
the
saw
previous
otherwise.
day, you saw him in
Right.
video.
And that video's still out
no,
there. The
living
different-
color.
Yeah, right.
And it strikes me that even, and for the benefit of the doubt, John Mannion is the victim here, which I doubt because I think the allegations are very credible, unsubstantiated but credible.
Why do you think that?
Wouldn't he say, I'm a tough boss on occasion? I'm sorry that people, you know, I wish they had come to me earlier, and it would seem authentic and believable, but I guess he's under a tremendous amount of pressure. But you reference alternative candidates. Sarah Clehood her character is impeccable. She's dynamic, and to your point in asking Cassandra the question, I think it's very important that she's a woman. To me, I think we need more women in politics.
We do.
Period.
Agreed.
What part do you think? I mean, it's kind of interesting too. Like the role that anger is playing in this campaign, because Brandon Williams, one of the things he's most known for is that going off on his staffer at the Christmas party when it was revealed his daughter was on OnlyFans. You know that angry outbursts. We've all seen that. That's all over. We see that all the time. It pops up a lot on social media. Now the John Mannion stuff. It's kind of interesting, I think, in a way, how much anger is going to be could play part in this election. Two angry people on stage debating, which could be interesting, but may not get a lot of stuff done.
I would be more concerned about his voting record, which speaks for itself, which is extremely radical, right wing.
You're talking about?
I'm talking about
Williams.
Brandon Williams,
Yeah.
and so he can be as peaceful as the day is long, like the Speaker of the House, Mike
That's
Johnson, and represent what I find deeply troubling, disenfranchising, policies, and their votes speak for themselves.
So if the votes speak for themselves, and most people, they're Democrats I've talked to, would agree that the votes that Mannion has taken in the state, as the senator in the state, his votes, and we can assume his votes, if he's elected in Congress, will be for the things that we believe in. He'll probably vote the way that we quote unquote want him to do as Democrats. So if that's the case, doesn't matter if these allegations are true. If he'll do the job we want him to do, why does it matter?
That's a very complex question, and I think yes, it does matter.
We have 3 whole minutes here, so go right ahead.
No, I think
knock
it
yourself
absolutely does matter. That you're not absolved by of having good character by the fact that you vote for things that a voter might favor. Either you have good character or you don't, or if you don't, you're working on getting good character.
So
People make mistakes to that point, but you need to repair them, and the first thing you need to do is own up to them. So, but yeah, you're asking for a speculative answer. My personal opinion is yes, it does matter. Character matters, regardless of whether they vote for things that I favor.
So
and I want to say that
please go ahead.
ongoing mistakes creates policy. That's the way you run. That's the way you roll. And that's,
what does that mean? Ongoing
well,
mistakes creates
well,
policy.
if this is a pattern, if this is a pattern of behavior, a pattern of treatment of his staff, and we've heard that there's a great turnover in his staff,
Yeah,
this
that's
becomes
true, yeah.
policy.
Right.
And we have I have an expectation for my representative to treat people fairly and to be a just boss, and that would be a problem.
So when we come back from break, one of the things I want to talk about, and John Stemen should be here to join us after that too. I want to talk a little bit about how I interviewed one of the people who is one of the concerned Mannion staff, one of the authors of the Median post. But I want to ask you, Cassandra, because you and I both have something in common where we both, and we will in the future too, have experiences where people are going to say stuff about us that's not true.
We're marginalized. We are
and-
marginalized from marginalized communities. Yes.
Right, and at times we're also I think marginalized by people within our own community. I mean, we're both in the public eye,
Yeah.
and we both had the experience of people people who lie about us and who put stuff out there
Yeah.
and say this stuff is true when it's not. And how do we know? How do you know when to treat something seriously? How do you know?
Me?
How do you know?
Oh.
Yeah, with these concerned Mannion staffers, why do you think they are credible?
Well, because they had the courage to stand up. In a situation that's not easy to stand up in any circumstance. Your boss is bearing down on you, and we've already discussed that part.
With a lot of stake, and
Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit more about how I interviewed them when we come back from break.
Okay.
You're in the hot seat on a Media Monday.
This is Cassandra Harris Lockwook, and this is the Hot Seat.
Hi everybody, this is Ron Klopfenstein, and this is the hot seat on a Media Monday. Before I get started with this last segment of the show, I do want to say one more time that I am a supporter of Sarah Clee Hood. I've been a supporter of Sarah Clee Hood for the past 2 years since the last time she ran, and if you go to Sarah Clee Hood's website, you can see, yes, I am a supporter. So I want to get that out there. I did that when I interviewed her, and I also want people to know that I'm trying very hard not to be biased here. I'm trying to get both sides of things. When the Medium blog post came out, I emailed the email address that was given in the blog post for people who had more questions or concerns. I spoke to one of the people who wrote that blog post last Thursday on June 20th. This interview took place right after I got the text from his campaign staffer from Senator Mannion's campaign staffer canceling his appearance on the show today. So when I spoke to one of the people who wrote the Medium blog post entitled "To Central New York," and I asked a few questions here if the conversation was on background, it's off the record. There's not too much I can say, but I did get permission to print the answers to 3 questions that I had, 3 specific ones. I want to share with you what they told me. So one thing I wondered, this post came out on Monday, June 17th. This came out after early voting had already begun. So I wondered, why did they wait until after voting began? Voting had only been that Saturday and the Monday, so it really wasn't too much time. But I did wonder, why did you wait? So their answer to me was that they actually were hoping they would get picked up in the media before the early voting began. But when it was not, and they kind of knew they had to go ahead and do it themselves, they still wanted to, and I'm going to quote them here, they wanted to proceed with, quote, utmost caution in their wording due to the seriousness of the matter. I also wondered if they were the ones who shared their blog post with the New York Post, because when the New York Post got a hold of it, that's kind of when it broke open. I believe they were the first media to report on this, and once they did, it kind of became fair game. I felt more comfortable talking about it myself than just quoting the Post. So I asked them, did they reach out to the Post? They told me that they did not. They do not know how the Post discovered their letter, but that the first contact was definitely initiated by the New York Post to them. My last question to them, and after I saw the interview on WKTV, Luke Radell's piece, I wondered, was this part of a dirty tricks campaign by the Serickley Hood people? So I asked him, are you part of the Serickley Hood campaign? Is there any kind of connection with them? Is this part of a way to a last minute way to put down her opponent and to help her win the primary? They told me, and I quote, they have no contact with the Serickley Hood campaign. And Serickley Hood also released a statement that said the same thing. My campaign had no involvement with the staffers' efforts to come forward. So, John Stemen joins us now. He's our political commentator here. Does this kind of thing matter in a primary vote?
It should matter greatly. I don't know, given all the circumstances, how much attention it's receiving from average voters. For example, the other day, a friend of mine, contacted me via Facebook Messenger and said, "What can you tell me about John Mannion?" Now, he had no idea about the allegations, but
he had not
heard any of it.
Oh, wow!
And he was sold when I told him about her. He was a veteran, kind of a moderate Democrat, and when he heard about her Air Force service and checked out the website, he was very impressed, and he said, "Well, I've changed my mind now." So, but he, to me, it was kind of fascinating because he's a pretty knowledgeable person, sort of a political junkie.
Really?
And
he hadn't heard anything about
he didn't know at all about the allegations, and I referred him to the New York Post.
When did you talk to him?
This was just yesterday.
Oh, so it had been out for a week?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it makes me wonder, and I think your caller, was it Kathy that was on the line?
Yes.
And she kind of pointed to the fact that it's sort of, times are different now. People don't generally subscribe to newspapers, and I don't think people consume news in general like they used to. So it sort of depends on, they see anything on social media? Did a friend like me happen to tell them about it? I mean,
Right.
I posted the article on my personal Facebook page just saying, this is out there, and
The
if
New
you're
York
voting, you
Post
should
one
be
or the
aware of it.
Medium one?
The New York Post one. But so I don't think we have any way of gauging, how much people are aware of this. I do think what's more likely to happen is maybe some of the Mannion supporters just don't show up, but that benefits Serickley Hood.
True.
Don't show up to what?
To vote.
To vote tomorrow or to vote early voting.
Well, the early voting's over, so tomorrow's
Right.
what's
Or
left.
had voted. vote.
Yeah.
Do you think that primary voters are, in general, like more aware of what's going on, the people that vote in the general election? Because you kind of have to be invested to be in a primary, to vote in the primary.
I think that primary voters are much more likely to participate in politics at some level, be it, a party committee person or been active in campaigns, unless there's some personality like a Trump involved, and
Where
this
everyone
is
knows
not the case. And I just
yeah.
know from early voting that the turnout in Oneida County was very light, but that doesn't necessarily.
Oh, for the primary early
Yeah.
voting? Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily translate to Tuesday. I mean, primaries are unpredictable. My guess is that this story may result in lower turnout in the end. Like I said, some of the Mannion
Overall?
supporters may just not show up at all, thinking that it's something the other side did generate, or just feeling disheartened that their candidate sort of let them down. But again, that only benefits, Sarah Clee Hood. And
Do you think, it seems like there's a different, like, what happened last time in the primary vote is it seemed like what Oneida County wanted, we wanted out here in the Mohawk Valley, Utica Rome, was different than what they wanted over in Syracuse, the Democratic voters in Onondaga. Why are they different over there? Like, I kind of wish we had a Syracuse voter here so I could ask them, like, how can they see things differently than Democrats here do?
I think this is not as good a congressional district, frankly. I think the old one, even though it's 80 miles away, Binghamton has a lot more in common with Utica than Syracuse does, and I think there's sort of a sense, not exactly a superiority complex, but just an idea that, everything to the west and south is pretty rural and just not
So they
as
don't care
important.
what we think here, so.
And they want somebody from there on their turf,
Yeah.
to represent them. Now, Sarah Clee Hood lives in that area, but she's been very active campaigning and has quite a following
Duet,
outside Syracuse.
Yeah. So, John, John Hysell, so what do you think? What do you think about that? Because it does seem strange to me. Like, I was actually at her party last year on the primary night, and the first results seemed to come in from this part of the district, and she was doing good, and she was ahead, and optimistic, and then the Syracuse districts came in, and just she was close, but
She lost by some 700 votes, I think.
right.
I can only speculate. Having the comments that John just made relative to access to media might drive that. She is spending most of her time digitally.
Yeah.
And financed a little bit differently. She doesn't have the outside money that Mannion does, so he's papering the world with his ads.
Every day I get something in the mail
PACs,
from him.
from
Yes,
labor, teachers' PACs that were funding it.
right.
So, maybe that's a different dynamic in Onondaga County, though we've been redistricted. So
Yeah.
we look very different. I mean, we're on the far eastern edge of the district now.
Right.
And so I'm not informed enough about the demographics or how people vote. Though it was noticeable that Sarah Clee Hood won Oneida County.
Yeah.
And I think the entirety of the county was part of that district. And lost because of Onondaga County voting.
Right. So,
I
because
guess we're just smarter here.
I concur.
So, Cassandra, if it was 700 votes last time, do you think that these revelations and the coverage and the posts and the coverage, people that read the blog posts, people that are sharing the blog posts, do you think that that's enough to change the margin of error to
Well, I don't know with the
swing
time
into-
constraint that we have right now. I don't know how much time there is to get this information out to enough people to make a difference. But we still have the Senate investigation that's going on, and we were asking off the air, well, actually, I'll let John say it because the question is, what would be the impact if and when they
Right.
do complete this investigation in a timely manner? How much time before the general election? What sort of impact does it have? Is there any obligation on the part of the committee who's assessing the allegations to make a recommendation? Here, John.
It really, what difference is it going to make? I mean,
It could make a big difference.
Well, I mean, if they find out, he's a really bad boss. I mean, is it going to make a difference?
It would make a difference to me.
Well, to voters, but
Yeah.
I mean, he wouldn't necessarily have to drop out of the election,
But
drop out of this.
but John has some
go
answers.
ahead.
I would just guess that what they'll come up with is something advisory in nature that deals with how his office is staffed, probably some way of supervising or maybe even housing staff elsewhere, or he
Wow.
could get stripped of committee assignments or committee chairmanships. And I think
But he's leaving the Senate.
But
either
yeah,
way,
that's the whole
so,
thing.
you know.
He's leaving the Senate, and
Yeah.
they can't do anything, as to how he might be looked at in Congress. It's a whole separate office, but I think it gets a lot of coverage, and again, it's not a good situation for the Democratic Party if you're opposing Brandon Williams with someone that is under a microscope, and that my guess is there'll be some recommendations, because the statements that they made, that is the state Senate Democrats, I thought were pretty strong. They didn't say, this is just mudslinging. They're saying these appear to be very credible,
Right.
and they need to be investigated. And so I don't know that the repercussions will be so bad on these staffers if they're ultimately, unveiled by the party itself, because I don't think anybody in the party is going to want to get too close to John Mannion now. They're not going to want to defend him. It'll be like Andrew Cuomo when he came out and said, "Oh, these are just baseless allegations." There weren't too many defenders out there, and I think you'll see the same with
Well, do you
him.
think people in the party though would be willing to hire them? Like, if it does come out like who they are, do you think it would make them hard to get jobs in the party? Because people would think, well, they betrayed their boss one time, I mean,
Maybe.
So I mean, they have reason for like wanting to be. Will they have to reveal themselves once it becomes a Senate investigation to the Senate investigators? Will they have to, at some point, at least tell them who they are?
I think it'll be more like the New York Post or the Albany paper trying to come out,
Yeah.
and find out through others who these people are. They'll be looking at the staff roster from a year or two ago and kind of, trying to connect the dots. I don't know whether the Senate would reveal the names of people that are
Or like
assisting
force them to
investigation.
testify, I guess.
Yeah.
Will they have to testify?
We're speculating on how this might impact voters, but we live in a different era.
Right.
So we have a presumptive Republican presidential candidate who was convicted of a variety of crimes, some of which were 34 felonies.
Yeah, you're talking about the presidential.
I'm talking about
Not
Donald
the
Trump,
con-
and yet, his standing in the polls is roughly dead even with the incumbent president. So I think that we live in a different world. I found the allegations against John Mannion credible,
Okay.
but anonymous.
Right.
I'm deeply troubled by them, and if true, it would have a huge impact. But between
Well,
now
will
and
it, though?
if,
I mean,
give me a
that's the thing.
second.
Yeah.
We're talking about 134 days roughly till the general election.
Right.
The Senate, New York State Senate's not going to act within that
Huh.
time period.
Right.
There's no way. I mean, it's just not the way they work. And again, to have a contrast, because it is a competitive race with the other party. The other party tolerated George Santos for well over a year before it even made it to the ethics committee because they needed his vote because they have a razor-thin majority. So we need to have some perspective relative to who John Mannion is. If this is what he did, shame on him. He better come clean. If he doesn't, it would impact how we support him.
But if he did
but
do it,
Brandon
he
Williams,
doesn't-
I saw a video of him doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
With threats that were not only credible but visible and
So it
audible.
doesn't matter if they're
Well,
both the candidates.
I
Doesn't
think
matter
we're in a
if they're both
different
like
era.
that.
I think it matters less.
Wow.
You asked me earlier, it doesn't matter to me. It does. So would I send money to John Mannion if he wins the primary? The answer is no.
But
I
would you
wouldn't.
not vote for him?
No, I would.
No, meaning that yes, you would still vote
I
for
would
him.
vote for the Democratic candidate because I feel strongly that Brandon Williams is a poor representative for District 22.
So ultimately, then, do you think that if it turns out that he did do this, the Senate confirms this, or if he admits it, or if like more evidence comes to light, and if he is a candidate, if he wins tomorrow and he's running against Brandon, do you think that it's going to matter really in the election? Do you think it'll have any impact on
I
who
think
wins?
she should call for a write-in then.
And that occurred to me as well.
She should call for a write-in.
Yeah, the likelihood of that
And
succeeding is
and
very
blast
low.
him. Blast him.
But
I want to make sure you're on mic. So you're just saying that she should, if
If
she
he
doesn't
wins,
yeah.
I think that the Democrats that support her should call for a write-in and totally, put all this stuff up in his face. If you don't think that the Senate's going to act quickly enough to come up with a decision,
And we know they're probably
the people,
not.
power of the people.
At the end of the day, in the political equation, electability is a big deal.
That's right.
And so,
Especially in the primary. That's the whole point of the
your
primary, right?
question is, I can only speculate, but it is not a good thing for John Mannion.
Well, there's just one big difference between the two candidates, very obvious here, but one is a Republican and one is a Democrat. You saw how quickly Andrew Cuomo folded and everybody left him. If this were a Republican like Brandon Williams, Republicans would just completely ignore it, stonewall it, and let it go away.
Right, right.
So there is a difference there, and I think a lot of Democrats are not going to want to stand with John Mannion if he, even if he wins the primary, they're going to, be
They're
keeping
going to
their
what
distance.
though? I mean, are they going to not vote? Or are Democrats not going to go to vote on election day? Are they going to vote for the opponent?
Right.
Are they going to,
Right.
A lot of people will be voting on election day in November because of the presidential race this
Right.
time and some other races that are out there. But I mean, my inclination would almost be to let the race blank if it's him. But then you're maybe helping Brandon Williams, and I don't want to do that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, if people are, if you're going to have a choice between one or the other. Like, is the writing campaign, is it a viable?
It worked in
option?
Buffalo when the mayor, is it Byron Brown? That's the mayor of Buffalo.
That's right.
He had been in for 3 terms. There was a very liberal candidate who surprised him and defeated him, and he just went out there and worked for months and was able to win a write-in campaign for mayor, even though he didn't have a major party line. So
Yeah, Senator Murkowski in Alaska won her statewide election with a write-in.
Right.
Well, if anyone can do that, it's Sarah Clee Hood. If anyone
was
can motivate
charismatic.
people to pull off a writing campaign, it would be her. But do you think that she'll be the nominee? So let's just predictions. Tomorrow, well, not at this time, tomorrow, 4 hours from now, who do you think will be the nominee? Will it be Senator Mannion or Sarah Clee Hood? All things considered. John, you're first, and John Stemen next, and Cassandra, you're going to be number 3. But that's
So
how we
if
should
you want to hear me
easy ride home.
wildly speculate without any knowledge, I think it's going to be Sarah Clee Hood.
John,
It should be.
okay, John.
I think that enough Mannion supporters may stay home that it's going to be a virtual tie.
Okay.
In the end, a lot of his support in Onondaga County will evaporate because it was covered over there to some extent. So
So virtual tie, meaning that it'll be a
it'll be
tie.
a very, very close race, I
Okay.
think.
Well, who do you think will be
Well, it's wishful thinking, I'll say
Yeah.
Sarah Clee Hood, but I have no way of knowing. It all depends in primaries on turnout, on who
Sure.
gets out and where they're from.
So, Cassandra, you're up next. So, who do you think will be the nominees?
I go with John. Both Johns.
both, but not John Mannion.
No, not that one. No.
So
definitely
confusing,
does not get my vote.
all these Johns, So, all right. Well, you heard it there. So tomorrow is the primary vote, and next week at this time, but tomorrow, for about 4 hours from now, 9 o'clock is when the results start to come in. We'll know whether this had an impact or not, and whether this was a factor in the primary vote. And we'll also know going forward who the candidate is, and if it is John Mannion, we kind of know what ads Brandon Williams probably has queued up and ready to roll on the day after the primary vote. If it's him, we'll find out.
Maybe shouting at each other.
Yeah. I know it would be quite a debate if they go off on one another.
Right.
So. Thank you for joining me today in the hot seat on Medium Monday. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. Now I'm going to kick it over to Jay Easy for the Easy Ride Home.
John.